Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So I finally finished Horizon Forbidden West, which took me, frankly, a lot longer than I thought it would, but got the plat and everything, and boy do I have some things to say about it. So let's get into it. So let me just start by saying that I already know this video is going to end up being like 20 or 40, who knows. It's going to be a long one because I know I have a lot to say about this, and I know that probably a lot of you don't want to watch a video that long just to figure out what my thoughts are. So let me broadly start by saying I really like this game. I like it a lot. I think that it's going to be at the top of a lot of people's Game of the Year conversations at the end of this year, and I think it absolutely is going to deserve to be up there. I do think it has a lot of problems, and I'm going to talk about that in the rest of this video, as well as the exact reasons why I love it, and we'll even get into some spoilers at the end. Don't worry, I'll let you know before we get into that. But for those of you who don't want to watch the whole video, my broad thoughts on it are, if you own a PS5 and you already like the open world formula of video games, this is probably going to be one of the must-have games for you this year, if not this generation. Alright, so let's get into the actual nitty-gritty details about this game, and where better to start than with the combat. And in terms of hunting machines, very little has changed. It is still that combat focus of shooting specific weak points on specific machines with specific types of arrows to do massive damage. I mean, if you just shoot a regular arrow into the front of a charging machine, it's going to be like doing the same thing to a car. It's not going to stop. So what you have to do is shoot shredder ammo to knock the weapons off of it, or recognize, oh, that one's got some acid tanks on its back, and if I shoot them with acid arrows of my own, then those tanks will explode, and it'll do a huge amount of damage to the machine that it's carrying, as well as any of the ones around it. And that can be really satisfying, because what that means is that instead of the game being focused on, oh, I just found a new bow and it does 10 more damage, now I'm really cooking with gas, it's, I have seen these machines before. Me, human being Daniel McGarland, playing this game has become better because I recognize that is a bristleback, and it has 2 acid canisters on its back, and if I shoot each one with an acid arrow of my own, then those will both explode, and this bristleback will be down in about 5 seconds. And that's super great. That's really fun. Now, I will say that that does come with the downside of, because those weak spots are often very small, it can be really irritating when you're fighting 3, 4, 5 machines at once to try and hit those specific weak points while getting charged at by 4 other machines, right? And the game seems to sort of know that that's a problem, because in most of the main storyline missions, you have a companion with you who can sort of take the heat off of you, right? Like, they're never necessarily going to do a ton of damage and like take out a huge machine for you, or probably finish off really any of the machines, but they draw enough of the aggro that you can hit those weak parts a little bit easier, and I really appreciate that. I believe that that's probably the #1 reason why they're included in those missions. That being said, while I appreciate those steps in the right direction to correct the shortcomings of the gameplay style that they chose, there are still some other steps that I wish they would take. I think that this game is in desperate need of a lock-on. You know, a lot of the times when you're flipping through all of your different ammo types and your different weapon types, and it can just get a little too hectic to just also have to manage the camera super hard the whole time you're doing that. So it would be nice if they added that, and maybe a block so you could do something other than just fully throw your body out of the way of some of these attacks. So hunting machines is still pretty much the same as it was, and it's still really good. Melee, which in the first game was frankly kind of a joke, is improved. Not to the point of being good, but to the point of being serviceable. Now, unfortunately, they also made melee combat a lot more mandatory by having machines rush you down a lot harder and having a lot more encounters with human enemies who will charge in on you. So it's kind of a a give and take, but it is an actual melee combat system that is usable now, and I appreciate that. That being said, a lot of the combos that they put in there do feel very samey, and they seem to all sort of revolve around just knocking the armor off of an enemy so that you can then shoot him with your bow. And I wish there was a little bit more variety there, because most of the time I end up just mashing through most human enemies anyway, because they have such little health, with the exception of a handful of human bosses. But those boss fights with humans are pretty consistently terrible. I can't think of a single human boss fight in this game that would not have been better off just not being in the game. Especially the one with Regala, where she spends the entire boss fight running away from you while simultaneously having approximately 4 million health. It's just not a great idea. And then the third sort of branch of combat is traps. And I didn't really use traps a whole lot in the first game, and I'm definitely not going to ever use them in this game, because while they were pretty useful in the first one, they've been pretty significantly nerfed here, in that they both seem to do significantly less damage. You're not able to put as many out on the field at one time unless you go through and upgrade the whole thing. And also, now you can set off your own traps, which is just really, really annoying. And it makes the whole concept of traps sort of a non-starter for me. And especially because there are so many different skill trees in this game, it makes it really easy to just ignore that one. Probably one of the biggest changes between the first game and this one is that they've added a lot of new traversal mechanics, whether it's a grappling hook or the glider or a handful of new mounts or just the ability to swim and dive. There are so many new ways to get from point A to point B, and that doesn't sound like a big deal. But when you consider that exploring the world of Horizon is probably its best aspect, it's very much appreciated. That being said, however, none of these mechanics necessarily feel especially great. I would say the best one is probably the glider, if for no other reason than because it saves you from having to climb back down off of something once you've climbed up it. So just saving all that time is really, really nice. They sort of had it in the first game where you could usually grapple hook onto something and then like rappel down pretty fast, but even that was slower than the glider, so it's nice to have. And I would say that probably swimming is the worst. If you've played a video game before, it's not going to come as a surprise to you that if there is a water level in a video game, it is usually the worst part of that game, and it is no different here. Despite the fact that being underwater in this game is frequently really, really beautiful, as is most of this game, mechanically it just doesn't feel very good. Aloy feels really heavy and slow underwater, like maybe she's just not a very good swimmer, which is understandable since she just learned how to do it in this game. But on top of that, you don't have any way of fighting back underwater, which is a problem because there are still machines underwater who will not hesitate to end your entire career the second they see you. And so I think that the developers did this on purpose so that when you're underwater, it's more of like a stealth gameplay type thing. But that means that you're combining underwater mechanics, which are not good ever, with stealth mechanics, which are very rarely good. And it's just not a good combination. That being said, you're going to have a lot of time to use all of these new traversal mechanics because just like the first game, for some reason, fast traveling is still a limited resource in this game. Now, you can craft the resource that you have to use to fast travel pretty easily, and you can buy it, and you can also fast travel for free from one campfire to another. But it just feels like an unnecessary and kind of clunky extra thing to have in this game, especially when you consider that for most people, that was one of the big complaints about the first game. So I don't really understand why they kept it in. Another reason that you're going to be using these traversal mechanics so often in this game is because there's approximately 4 million side activities. You know, you've got all of your standard rebel outposts and rebel camps, which are somehow different, but if you've played a Ubisoft game before, you know what they are. They're not any better or any worse than that. You've got the tall necks back from the first game, where you climb them up like a Ubisoft tower and then they reveal part of the map. I will say those are better in this game than the first one, because each one is sort of a new puzzle. There's a different way that you have to get up to the top. One you'll have to climb, maybe another one you have to pull down so that you can get onto it that way. One of them is especially annoying because it's probably the second one you're going to see, and it's right in the middle of the map, but you cannot get to the top of it until literally the end of the game, which just is really irritating to have this just big gray area right smack dab in the center of the map until the very end. The hunting grounds are back, and they are pretty much unchanged from the first game, with the exception of obviously there are new machines in them, because there are a lot of new machines in this game as opposed to the first game. I will say the fourth one of them is especially annoying. It has a tremor tusk, which is a massive woolly mammoth machine, and 3 claw striders, which are effectively velociraptors, and it's just not a fun combination to have to deal with. There's a ton of collectibles, of which I would say none are particularly worthwhile for collecting. There's vistas, where you like line up a picture from the old world with the ruins of what it is now. It's interesting to do once or twice, but there's so many of them that it just kind of stops feeling fun after a while. There's also survey drones, where you like climb up a thing and then jump and grab a drone and pull it down to get a collectible out of it. But all you get out of that is like a wallpaper for your home base that only lasts for about 2 seconds for some reason. And then there's also ornaments that you can give to a guy, and he'll like project these lights up into the sky. And that's probably the most interesting of them. But even then, they just don't really feel worth it. I ended up collecting all of them, even though there's not a trophy tied to them, just to see what would happen. And in every single instance, the answer was nothing. There isn't a big like blow off for collecting all of the things. So it just didn't really feel great. They've added melee pits, which is effectively... What you're probably thinking is that it's a place where you go in and you can't use your bow and you just have to melee combat, because they increased what melee combat was so much in this game. It's not that. It is instead just a tutorial where you have to go to these 3 different melee pits after unlocking melee combos in your own skill tree, and then do them there to unlock a medal so that you can do a different side quest. They're not great. They've also added racing, which feels like a really good idea, but it's just not executed very well, because riding your mount feels a little clunky. And once you realize that you can just kill the other racers, it becomes so easy that it's just kind of laughable. They added a board game into it that's called Machine Strike, or I think just Strike. And it's effectively like a tabletop war game. It's really overly complicated to be a side activity in a video game. And it's ultimately just ends up not being especially fun. But it's an interesting thing, if nothing else. I probably spent more time with all of these side activities than most players will, because I was trying to 100% this game for the sake of just experiencing everything in it for this review. And I do think that doing every single thing has made them all feel a little bit worse. I think if you just engage with them a little bit, you'll probably have more fun with it. Because there are definitely some things that become more irritating the more you play the game. Like, for example, basically every action you do just feels a little bit too slow. Like drawing the bow, or placing a trap, or climbing a thing. It feels just a couple of frames slower than you want it to be on every single instance. Or you'll walk into a room and you won't even know that there's a puzzle in there, and before you have the chance to realize that there is one, Aloy or somebody else will tell you the solution to the puzzle, and it's like, okay, well, there goes engagement on that one. She also just in general constantly talks to herself, where she's like, "Oh, that's a cool flower. I should put that in my stash. I can collect that from my stash when I get back." Like, she's just always talking to herself, and it gets really creepy. And a really minor one is, I wouldn't have noticed if there wasn't a trophy attached to it, because I did get the platinum in this game, is in order to upgrade a pouch, you have to have something in it. So the food pouch, which I never had anything in it because food in this game is by and large useless, I couldn't upgrade, and I didn't see it in my list of possible upgrades, so I assumed you upgraded it some other way. But no, it was just that I needed to buy a sandwich because otherwise I didn't have a wrapper to upgrade, I guess. It's just, the side activities of this game are just not great. Let's switch gears to talk about something a lot more positive about this game, though, which is also my favorite thing about it, which is the world. And I can't talk about the world of Horizon without first addressing how absolutely beautiful this game is. It is probably one of the most beautiful games that I have ever played. It's an absolute showstopper on the PlayStation 5. I don't know what it looks like on the PlayStation 4. I assume also good. The only game I could think of that looked better than this was probably Red Dead 2. And even then, not by a lot. It's just, this world is so dense with foliage and wildlife, and they do so much with different lighting effects and different weather effects to just make this world feel alive in a way that video games typically don't. Really, my only negative about the map of this game is that it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense geographically. Like, if you've seen the trailers, you know that San Francisco is an important location in this game. But you also, like, go to Nevada, and I think the opening section is supposed to be the Grand Canyon, and so the distance between those three things, like, just doesn't make sense, which is very easy to ignore. It was just something that I noticed. And what makes this world feel even more alive is the people that live in it. Not necessarily specific characters, but the different cultures. There are so many interesting and unique cultures to learn about, which is one of my favorite things to do in games. There's the Oseram, who are these engineers and scavengers who they love a good ale and they love a good fight. They are effectively fantasy dwarves, just not short. And if they are fantasy dwarfs, then the Utaru are fantasy elves. They are these farmers and singers who live in settlements that are crafted out of living plants. They do have a music motif that goes a little too far into the being annoying category, where it's like, our capital is called Plain Song, and our governmental body is called the Chorus, and our gods are called Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, and Do. And it's just a little on the nose in like a bad anime writing, like mistranslation kind of way, but not to the point of being a problem. One of my favorite cultures in this game is called the Quen, and they're this sort of Chinese-themed culture that is built around a misinterpretation of corporate America. And so, like, their leader is called Akio, which is spelled CEO, just as an example. So they're a really interesting group to learn about. Genuinely, the only group in this game that I don't like the writing of are the Tenakth, who unfortunately are also the group that you're probably going to spend the most time with in this game. So they're split into three different sub-tribes based on the biomes that they live in. There's the Sky Tribe, who lives up in the mountains, the Lowland Tribe, who lives in a jungle, and the Desert Tribe, who lives in a desert. And they are based around a sort of fanatic reverence for the United States military, which, especially given current events, just doesn't feel particularly great. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. I couldn't shake the feeling that it just wasn't awesome. And they're also so much more shallow of a culture in terms of writing than the other ones, where, like, the Utaru have this whole, we are part of the earth, like, thing going on, and the Quen have, like, this cultural drive to learn more about the old world. But the Tenakth, they're just fighters. They just fight and they raid, and it's just an uncharacteristically shallow set of writing for this game. Especially when they're supposed to be allies. Like, they are
Aloy's allies for the majority of this game. And one of the first things that a Tenakth character said to me was about how she caught some Oseram in Tenakth lands, and so she buried them up to their necks and let them die. And it's like, okay, well, the Oseram are like also just cool people who are my allies. Can we maybe not? But like Aloy was cool with it, so I don't know. It just didn't feel good. And then on top of just not being written well, I also this is gonna sound really stupid. I had a lot of problems with just the way that they looked. So they had an issue where like their clothing is this sort of ramshackle assembly of just different like rocks and plants and metals, which I guess makes sense for them because they're just like warriors who don't necessarily craft. But my problem with it is they're all painted these like really standard like apocalypse neon colors, and they've got this body paint on that just doesn't look very good. They all have really bad haircuts. Like, they don't dress for the different biomes that they live in. Like, the lowland tribe makes sense because they're wearing these like dark greens and blues, and they're wearing these tropical bird feathers to like sort of blend into their surroundings. But like the guys who are up in the mountains, the Sky Tribe, are showing exactly as much skin as the guys in the jungle. Like, they have their midriffs out and they're wearing like short sleeves and short pants, and it's like, you live in the mountains, there's snow here, like why are you not dressed for this? And it's the same thing for the people in the desert. Like, they're showing the exact same amount of skin. It's like, if you look at real world cultures that live in deserts or in mountains, like, they don't show a lot of skin because it's just not a smart thing to do. Like, it's a good way to get hypothermia or sun blisters, you know? Like, it just, I don't know. It's not an important thing, and most people probably wouldn't even notice it, but once I noticed it, I just could not shake it out of my head. So, I don't know. I needed to complain about it. To go back onto the positive side of things, one of the things I didn't mention about the visuals is how absolutely amazing they are able to render faces. And one of the things that helps them do is have a really great depth of representation of different people in this game. There are so many different colors of people in this game, right? There's tons of, there is no color of person that you could name that is not in this game. There are Asian people, there are black people, there's Native American people, everyone is represented, and not just like with one token character, but with a big selection of them. And it's not even just different, colors of people. There's two characters very early on named Boomer and Della, I want to say. They're sisters. And I don't say this to be mean or reductive or anything, but they are very clearly supposed to be autistic characters, and this isn't a thing that holds them back, and it's not a thing that is even really addressed. They are very successful engineers and crafters, whereas maybe in other games it would be played off as a joke. I'm thinking of Sandal from Dragon Age, which I love that game, but it was an uncharacteristically not great thing to do that was sort of representational of the time that game came out. I hate these airplanes. So, and there's also a ton of LGBTQ representation in this game. Like, there's a lot of people who are gay, or I'm starting to believe that Aloy is probably asexual herself. There's the representation in this game is amazing. It's something that you just don't see in games often, and because the faces are rendered so well, they look exactly like how the real actors who played those characters look, with the exception of Ashley Birch, who I guess they looked at Ashley Birch, who is absolutely gorgeous, and they said, not pretty enough, swap her out for a model, which is like, I don't know, it's weird. And then also, there's like a weird amount of like casual racism in this game, not between like real world things, like they're not throwing out slurs or anything, but there's definitely like tribal racism, where like an Oseram will be talking about the Tenakth and be like, oh, they drink blood, they're a bunch of cold-hearted murderers, or like they'll be talking about a Nutaru and they'll be like, oh, they're a bunch of plant-loving sissies, and it's like, it just feels a little out of place, especially when it happens between your companions in your home base, and it's like, we're crafting a better world, does it have to have this in it? I don't know. regardless, the world is absolutely beautiful and dense. And another aspect of that density of the real world that's really important to me is making sure that the different locations in the world actually matter. And this game does that, not to the best degree of any video game I've seen, but certainly good enough. You know, you go to Chainscrape and you see that it's a lumber town. Like you can watch them pulling logs out of the river and cutting them up to use as boards to build things. You go to Barren Light and they're rebuilding this fortress, and you can actually watch characters, you know, carrying bricks from one place to another. If you watch for too long, they pick the bricks up from the place they just took them and carry them back. But that's just a limitation of the fact that they can't actually have a building be constructed in real time in a video game. It just wouldn't work. You know, you go to there's a city called Hidden Echo, which I won't tell you what's happening there, but it's fantastic. It's so cool. Scalding Spear is distributing water to the entire desert, even though one of the other desert cities is flooded with fresh spring water. Whatever. It doesn't matter. It does fall off a little bit in the Tanakh areas, again, where it seems like because their culture is just them fighting, you know, you can't find like what those towns are for other than just like military encampments. Like all the people in it seem to be, by and large, just training to fight, which is boring. But, you know, it is what it is. And on top of that, the world also changes in reaction to the things that you do. When you take over a rebel camp, not every time, but enough of the times, you will have like merchants move into that camp because it's a good location, you know, or you know, sometimes machines will move in and make it like a new den for them, and you can go in and fight those guys. Or the overarching plot of this game, no spoilers, but is you're going out to get these subordinate functions from the first game and sort of reattach them to Gaia. And whenever you do that, they are able to do certain things. And unlike the things that they're doing, right, you'll get one and it'll be able to like clean up the water and get rid of that taint that you see in the trailers, right? And in a lot of games that I've played, it would just be that thing where they're like, I'm so glad that you did it. The water is getting better. But then like in the real overworld, it wouldn't. But in this one, you do it and the water looks more clear. Like it doesn't run red with that stuff. And there's a couple of different examples of that I won't spoil, but it's really great to see your actions taken in the game actually have an effect on the world, because a lot of games don't bother doing that, which is deeply irritating to me. And even the dialogue that you have in the game is very reactive to the different things that you did. As a non-spoiler example, very early on there's a side quest where you help rescue these guys out of a mine that has sort of collapsed. And I rescued them, and then I never talked to them again until the end of the game. And when I went back to look at the different towns, because I was, for purpose of this video, looking to see, hey, what does this town do? Like, does this town actually feel real? And when I went back to Chainscrape, where these guys were, I went and I talked to them, and they were like, and Aloy was like, I see you guys made it back to Chainscrape. That's great. And they were like, they were, you know, very thankful. But then the conversation continued into being like, and I saw that you did this, and then you did that. Wow, that's really cool. And like the conversation took into account that I didn't necessarily go straight from finishing that quest to talking to these guys. And that was such a wild thing to happen in a game. Like I have never had that happen in a game before. And it wasn't just that time. It was so many different conversations that I had specifically commented on actions that I took and quests that I had completed between other things that I could have done in any order, right? And it was just really cool. An unfortunate side to this is, I think partially because there was just so many moving pieces in this game, I did also run into a lot of bugs. And I think that I got specifically unlucky because I feel like I ran into pretty much every bug that there was to have. You know, I was falling through different platforms. I fell through the world a couple of times. I had weird audio desync problems. I had situations where audio was overlapping. I had one time where the audio did that content aware thing where everything sounds like weird and pitchy. Things were constantly clipping through things, and like there was pop-in constantly, and not just grass, but like sometimes I would be walking through the world and a city would just like appear in front of me, and it was strange. And then, you know, smaller things like just weird lighting bugs would happen pretty consistently. There was one particularly annoying one where it was like I had to kill all the machines in an area and before I could open a door that wasn't locked. And the last machine was like over on the other far end of the thing, had not noticed me at all, and was not hostile whatsoever, but I still couldn't go through the door. And it was like, okay, well, this feels like an unnecessary thing. It's an unfortunate side effect of having a world that is so large and so, you know, reactive and deep. But it wouldn't be a fair review if I didn't mention that I ran into these things. Another area in which I think this game really improves over its predecessor is in terms of character. I don't know if I'm alone in this, but at the end of the first game, I really didn't care about any of the characters at all, except maybe Silence, just because he was fun. But in this game, there are genuinely a good amount of characters that I really, really like and want to see what they do in future installments. I'm talking about... I really liked Varl, and I like Zoe, Katalo, Hikaru, just absolutely fantastic. Silence is still great, of course. Most of them are fine, but maybe a little boring, like Beta or Alva. And there's a very small subsection of ones who I would say are genuinely bad. I'm talking about people like Regala, who just does not work as an antagonist, and Tilda, who, again, without spoilers, her motivation is both really creepy and just doesn't make sense, and it does kind of feel like that character was not in the original draft of the game. My biggest complaint in terms of character of this game is that I feel like none of them get enough time to fully develop, with the exception of maybe Zoe and Kotalo, who I absolutely fell in love with. And they both have loyalty missions that are honestly a highlight of this game for me. If you haven't done those missions specifically, do them. They are outstanding. Unfortunately, much like the first game, I think the weakest character in it is Aloy. And I don't know if that's a popular opinion or not. So hopefully you aren't too mad at me for having said that. But she just seems, maybe I'm crazy, but she seems like so much more just dour and standoffish than she was in the first game. You know, she consistently keeps doing this holier than thou thing where it's like, the world is ending and only I can save it and I have to do it alone. And she spends like a huge portion of the beginning of this game basically telling all of her friends from the first game to like go fuck themselves. And it feels bad, right? Like she has this real problem with authority. Like whenever anybody exerts any level of authority over her, she absolutely freaks out, including like she meets the chief of a tribe and she's like, I need to do this thing. And he's like, okay, well, I can't let you do that because it's weird. But if you help me out for a second, then you can do it. And she's like, what if I just kill you? And it's like, Aloy, chill. Fucking Jesus Christ. Or like at one point, she's like, I need to get to the other side of this thing. And the guys are like, you can't go over there because right now, it's a very delicate political situation where we are not allowed to go there and they are not allowed to go here. There's an embassy happening in soon, and as soon as that is done, you can go. And she's like, I am Aloy and I'm going through, and it just like starts throwing this absolute bitch fit, and just like will not take no for an answer. And worse than that is that often when she does dumb or bad things like that, the writing of the game acts as if the thing that she has done was a good thing. Like, I won't get into specifics, but there is one point in the game where she basically removes a settlement's major form of defense against machines, and the people in the settlement are like, hey, that was a cool thing you did. And it's like, no, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Like, that was like, why would you do that? Right? And it's like, I don't know. It's just weird. And then, like, there's a lot of situations where she just chooses not to help people. Like she'll just, a fight will be happening and she'll just like watch people get hurt or even killed in some instances without helping them. She has there's like a quest where she kills a machine that this girl had been worshiping as a god, and it's not to spoil anything, but the girl who had been worshiping it, she doesn't get mad, but she's like upset. She's like sad and crying because the creature that she had treated as her god was just murdered in front of her. And Aloy like leans over to Varl and is like, why is she upset? It's just a machine. And it's like, fucking what? Like, can you have any level of empathy for just a second, please? Like, I don't know. She just kind of all around sucks. Like, I just really, really hate Aloy as a person. And I don't think that that's what they were going for when they wrote her. There's also one really dumb line that I wanted to mention here. I wrote it down in my notes. It's not proof that she's a bad character or anything, but at one point she's talking to a person in the desert tribe who lives in Nevada, and she says, I'm a Nora. I'm from as far east as you are west. And it's like, okay, they live in Nevada and you live in Colorado. There's like 3/4 of a country that is further east than where you came from. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, it just didn't make any sense and was kind of irritating. So I want to very briefly, before we get into spoilers, talk about just sort of the broad strokes of the story, because I do think that the story of this game is very good. It's one of the highlights of this game for sure. But I need to mention that this game does have the JRPG problem, where it has a very long opening section that is not anywhere near as good as the final product of the game. There's this opening section where you're messing around with Varl, and it takes... It felt like 6 hours. I'm sure it wasn't, but it took forever. And then you end up just kind of screwing around. Basically everything up until, if you've played the game, you get to a location called the base. And I would say at that point, that is when the story of the game becomes compelling and good. And the problem for me is that point happened about 20 hours in. And now your mileage on that will probably vary, because I was doing a lot of screwing about in the first area, like checking off all the things and doing all the side missions and all that. And a lot of people probably wouldn't do that, which might be for the best. But I wanted to mention that because at first I was not enjoying this game very much at all. I was like, this is bad. I almost wish I hadn't spent my money on it. And then I got to the base, and sort of a couple of the revelations that happened there, along with the sort of realization of what we were about to do, was just so interesting and so compelling that I had to see it through. And so I would say, if you are playing this game and you're very early on and you're not liking it, stick it through. The opening section makes it so that this is a hard game to recommend, because it's sort of like recommending someone watch One Piece, where it's like, it's one of the best shows ever, but it has a really, really rough first 100 episodes or whatever. You know what I mean? Just because in One Piece case, just because those episodes are so old, but you know what I mean, right? Like, it's tough, right? But once you get to the base, everything gets a lot better. They also start doing a thing that me and my friends have been joking about for a long time, where it's like, what if this game, but they just took some things from Mass Effect, and like the base kind of becomes like a What If Horizon but Mass Effect thing, where like your companions gather there and you can talk to them and like go on loyalty missions from there. And so it was really fun to see that happen. But I wanted to make sure to get that out there, that if you're not having fun in the beginning of this game, try to stick it through until at least the base. If you don't like it after that, fair play. So I really like this game. Its world is so interesting and so deep that I want to spend time in it, and I want to spend time with a lot of these characters. But because of just the plethora of bugs that I ran into, as some really lackluster side content, and a shortcoming in terms of writing on a couple of different fronts, I'm going to have to give Horizon Forbidden West a 7.5 out of 10. And now, if I was playing this game at a time when those bugs had been patched, as I imagine that many of you watching this will, I could easily see that score going up to an 8 or maybe even higher. But unfortunately, that's not the experience that I had with it, so I have to grade it based on that. Now, I do want to have a brief little spoiler cast at the end here, but before I get into that, I wanted to say thank you to any of you who have watched this far into the video. It really does mean a lot to me to get so much support from all of you. If you liked this review up until this point, please like the video, share it with a friend, subscribe, do all of the things that all of the YouTubers want you to do. It really does mean a lot to me, more than you might think, honestly. And so, for those of you who don't want to see a spoiler cast, I'll see you next time. That was your cue to leave. We're gonna get into spoilers now. If you're still here when the cut happens and I start talking about spoilers, that's on you. I gave you all the warning in the world. That's on you, bud. Oh my god, can you believe that Aloy dies at the end? Holy shit, I didn't see that coming. She didn't die at the end. That was a lie. That was a test. I've tested you. I've tested to make sure that the people who are here are actually wanting to see spoilers. This was really stupid. Anyway, one of the things that I really want to talk about is the quest in which you sort of revitalize Las Vegas. I think that is almost certainly the coolest part of this game, bar none. I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but that part of the game is absolutely amazing. Yes, you have to go underwater for a large portion of it, and yes, being underwater does suck, but I would say that is the best section in which you have to be underwater in the game. It's, being under there sucks and it doesn't control well, but it's beautiful while you're down there, so much more than any other location. And then when you go back up into the desert, which before when you went down was largely nondescript, there were just these ruins scattered around, and then all of a sudden it's this beautiful city of just multicolored holograms of giant dragons and like a Japanese pagoda and an eagle and like all these huge resplendent buildings. It's amazing. Like, I don't think this is going to be my game of the year, as you'll probably already know by now because I gave it a 7.5, and that's not exactly like game of the year score. But also I started playing Elden Ring, and I'm liking that a lot better. Spoilers. But that moment, coming back up out of the depths and seeing all those holograms, I think it's helped by the fact that I did that quest at night, is probably going to end up being like one of my moments of the year, if not my top moment of the year in gaming. Like it was so cool. Absolutely beautiful. And speaking of really cool moments in this game, I love going to Ted Pharaoh's tomb. What's it called? Thebes? I think it's Thebes. The fact that Ted Pharaoh is so far up his own ass that he's like, well, my last name is Pharaoh, so I'm going to build myself a ridiculous Egyptian pharaoh tomb is like so dumb, but in a fun way that I really appreciated. I do hate how in that quest, like Ted Pharaoh is still alive and he's been mutated into this like disgusting monster, but you never get to see mutant Ted. Like, what the fuck? I don't necessarily need to fight it, but like, can I see it? Like, that dude with the torch just like went around the corner, and then you just hear like a bruh, and like it's dead, and it's like, it's not that you didn't have the budget for it. What's the reason? What's the why? I don't understand it. Oh man, let's talk about Zoe. Okay, so Varl and Zoe. First of all, I'm mad that Varl's dead. I think that it was an impactful moment. I got really suspicious with how much they were building him up to be a good guy, and I was like, fuck, they're gonna kill him, aren't they? And I was also really mad because it was like, we knew that the Zeniths were gonna be there. We knew that they were gonna be there, and we made every single preparation for this mission except how to deal with them when they got there. And that feels like such a stupid oversight for the gathered group of really smart people that we had on the team at the time. Like, it genuinely irritated me that happened, because it just felt like, I don't know, it just felt like kind of lazy. But boy, Zoe sure went from like not knowing a dude to being a single mom in record time. Like, she must have beaten the womb speed record on that one, huh? Because like, this game must have taken place over what, like tops 3 weeks, right? And she went from literally meeting a guy to being pregnant with his child and him being dead. And it's like, fuck. Like, that's wild. So at the end of the game, if you're watching this, I assume you either don't care or already know. But, like, Beta releases Hephaestus, which is the subroutine that creates the machines. And she, like, puts it into the Zenith 3D printer machine to create machines that will then fight the Zenith's weird space machines. Or whatever the fuck. And then Hephaestus gets away, I guess. Which I'm hoping will be the DLC. Because we spent the whole game with Gaia being like, we need to get the other subroutines. But it doesn't matter how many of them we get if we don't get Hephaestus. Like, she spent the whole game saying, if we don't get Hephaestus, none of this matters. Because the world will still end. I won't be able to fix anything. And then at the end, you just like, bye Hephaestus, it's nice having you around for a second. That was cool how you made dinosaurs that time. Like, there wasn't a way we could do that without releasing him? Like, we was merged into Gaia. Couldn't have Gaia just, like, taken over the printer and done a thing? I don't know. Like, it was a cool moment. I liked seeing that fight. But it sucks. I don't like it also. The number one thing, though, that I want to talk about in this spoiler cast is the Zeniths. And how they just don't make any sense whatsoever. Right? Okay, so they were hinted on really early on when we went to like the space station, and it was like, oh, the thing went to space and it went to the Sirius colony, and then Aloy says like the ship got blown up, which I don't know. They must have said that in the first game at some point. I just didn't remember. But like me, being a big brain Dan over here, I was like, if that doesn't come back up, I'll be shocked. I'll be genuinely shocked if we learn this one weird super specific thing that and it doesn't ever come back up again. So when it did, I wasn't necessarily surprised. I was not expecting that they would be 1,000-year-old immortal cyborgs from space. Like, I didn't think that was where the direction we were going. You know, that's wild. And also, can we talk about how, like, okay, so Elizabeth Sobek's whole plan was like, okay, we can't stop the machines, so we're going to let them we're going to give up, basically, and we're going to let them destroy the entire planet until they burn themselves out, and then we will regrow the planet on the ashes of this. It's kind of a give-up plan. It's like give up, but we have an extra life plan, right? And the Odyssey team, the Far Zenith guys, they were like, we're not going to give up necessarily. Like, we're not going to just we're just going to roll over and let these things kill us. We're going to leave, which to me feels like a much more like intelligent choice. And the fact that they went to Elizabeth and they were like, look, you're creating an AI that can terraform a planet. We would really like just a copy of that, so that we can, you know, if we get there and the planet isn't survivable, we can fix that, right? Which seems like a super fair thing to like ask, right? And she says no. And then they're like, okay, well, we still need this because of like survival of the human race potentially. So they do a little bit of light corporate espionage and try to steal a copy of it. And then Elizabeth is like, fuck you. And she has her whoever the alpha of Hades was, I forget his name, like send a thing to their ship that effectively kills them. Like she murders what, as far as she is aware at the time, could very well have been humanity's last hope because of a little bit of corporate espionage. And that feels deeply, deeply shallow. Like, I cannot fathom a world in which a character that I am supposed to care about would make that decision. Like, fuck that. What a terrible, terrible woman. And speaking of terrible woman, let's talk about Tilda. I hated Tilda in this game. Was she a good actress? Yes. Full stop. She was a good actress. I mean, she's great. She's fantastic. However, her motivation and stuff just like doesn't make any sense at all. Like this. Okay, so correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, right? Okay, so the Zeniths left, and then they fucked about and created an evil AI or whatever again, because I guess that's what we do. And then they came back, and they just wanted to stop off and get Gaia so that they could basically to unfuck the thing that Elizabeth had fucked in the first place, so that they could go and, you know, re-terraform a new planet, right? But instead of just doing that, when they came back and the Earth was like populated, they went, well, fuck all these guys. Like, just immediately told them all to go fuck themselves, and then like started like killing them and dropping them, and didn't even bother talking to them. Like, they saw that this girl that Aloy was a clone of Elizabeth and had a copy of Gaia, and like clearly there was some level of intelligence there. Like, they weren't just like tribal. Well, they were tribal, but they weren't like, you know, cave people, right? Like, she was clearly intelligent. And they're just like, oh, we'll just kill her and take the thing. Like, why? Like, they both, so, okay. At that one lab with the weird spider robot, there were two kernels for Gaia. There was Aloy took one for Team Good Guys, and Beta took one for Team Bad Guys. And so that was the one part that we were told, like, cannot be copied. And even then, it's like, you guys are immortal space wizards. You can figure out how to copy a fucking file, right? So here comes another airplane. I'm not going to cut this one out, okay? We're going to deal with this airplane, and we're going to move on with our lives afterwards. I have had to deal with so many airplanes while I was recording this, and I'm not cutting it out anymore. We're just going with it. Okay, so they both had a copy of Gaia, right? And then it was like, okay, well, we have to collect the subroutines. And it was like, okay, well, why couldn't we just make copies of them? Why did we have to fight to the death over these subroutines? It's just files. You are immortal space wizards, and you don't know how to copy and paste? Like, I realize it's more complicated than that, probably, but like, you are some of the smartest people that existed on Earth before the war. Like, you couldn't think of something? Like, I don't get it. And then Tilda so Tilda was in a relationship with Elizabeth, and so when she saw a clone of Elizabeth, she was like, I guess she got all hot and bothered again, and she was like, this is the only person I care about now. And so she switched over. So instead of explaining the situation about how there's an evil cloud of whatever coming to Earth and it's going to destroy the whole planet, and being like, you should come with me, and trying to like appeal to her on like a logical sense, she instead face turned against the Zeniths, and then helped Aloy kill all of the Zeniths, and then after that was like, okay, what if just the two of us get on this spaceship that we probably can't even logically pilot with just the two of us, and we alone fuck off to a different planet? And it's like, Tilda, why does that sound like a good idea to you? If you had just explained this to Aloy beforehand, there would have been so much less need of this. It probably would have been faster for everyone to just not have to fight over it. To just be like, well, we have all the subroutines. They were just kind of sitting around. And we're going to make some copies of them. And then you guys can fuck off into space with whoever wants to go with you. And we'll stay here and fight the evil cloud monster or whatever. Which, by the way, can we talk about how stupid that is? Like, we have escalated to evil cloud monster in the same way as, like, Fable 3 or Season 10 of Smallville or whatever. Like, that's so dumb. I hate that. Are you kidding me? There's another airplane in this one take after I made a whole thing about how I'm not going to cut them out. This is what I deal with every time I record, by the way. And I'm so glad that you guys are finally getting to see this because it is a nightmare. I'm actually moving in a week for basically this exact reason. But yeah, evil cloud monster. What the hell is that? Like, we couldn't think of something more intelligent than evil cloud monster? Come on. Come on. That's so dumb. Anyway, those are all the things that I really wanted to talk about in the spoiler section of this thing. If you made it all the way to the end of this and heard how I live at an airport and potentially have really bad takes about space people, I assume if you watched to this point that you've finished the game and know the story or don't care. Either way, I would love to hear what you think about the game in the comments below. And I know that like every person says that because they want to get engagement on their videos, but genuinely, I actually want to know what you think about this game because of all the people that I know, I think 2 of my friends have actually played this game, and I don't even know if one of them has finished it. So I genuinely do not have anyone to talk about the spoilers of this game with that has also experienced it. So please, feel free. Let's have a conversation. I'm dying for it. But for the second time this video, hopefully before a third airplane comes through in this same take, I'll see you around.